This video will contain spoilers for up to chapter 56 of Undead Unluck's manga, so if you're not caught up to that point yet, please come back later when you have. Hi there, welcome to my channel. My name is Sky and, well, I'm a fucking big Undead Unluck fan. If you've seen, my past few videos have been Undead Unluck related, specifically to the anime's trailers. I've got a few manga-like discussions and theories and whatnot videos planned, but if you're more familiar with my TikTok page, you'll know I do weekly breakdowns, and I've been excited for this anime for ages. And if you two watch my trailer breakdown from last week, you'll remember that one, I said I was going to do a reread of what I thought was going to be covered in season 1, and 2, I'm going to do a video like breaking down where I think season 1's going to be covering, and also what episodes will cover what chapters. That's this video. Basically, how I've gone about doing this. As I was reading the chapter, I had a list of all the episodes, like how many I think was going to be in the season, which, since it's a 2-core, as far as I know, we don't have an exact number, but I believe it's about 23, 24, something like that. But I've gone with the understanding that it's a 23 episode season. So I've gone through, and as I've read through the chapters, I've basically marked down on each episode in the list what chapters I think are going to be covered and where it's going to end off. Either full chapters, which a majority of these are, or for some of them, ends like it's certain pages or a couple pages within the chapter, and the next episode finishes off that chapter and does the rest. I'm just going to be going over that list and mostly like my reasoning for like why I think it is, like if it's like ending in certain pages in the middle of a chapter, or just like why I think it's specific pacing, particularly for like one section near the end, because I had admittedly difficulty near the end in like one specific arc of just like, okay, I don't know how they're going to cover this part, because I feel like these specific chapters should be like endings. I'll talk about more in depth when I get to them episodes. And I did also kind of make it a bit hard on myself, because I have a specific place where I think season 1 should end myself personally. I do think it could end a little bit later, or maybe even a little bit earlier. There's a range of where season 1 could end, but I've chose this place because I think it makes the most sense for season 1's ending. Okay, so first up we have episode 1, and I mean, it's episode 1, season 1 of a Weekly Shonen Jump anime. Series standards is normally to only cover the first chapter. I don't see David Productions breaking away from that standard, so yeah, I believe episode 1 is just going to be chapter 1. And then episode 2, I believe, is going to cover all of chapters 2, 3, and the first page of chapter 4, page 2. And the reason I believe chapter 4, page 2 is going to be the end of episode 2 is for the simple fact of like the ominous hint towards Gina with like Shen talking to Moi here. I think it's a decent ending off point for an episode. It's also a good starting off point for the episode, so it could actually be both. Next up is episode 3, covering the rest of chapter 4, and I believe just ending off at the end of chapter 5. My reasoning for this is because, again, while it's not a hard rule, industry standard for Weekly Shonen Jump animes tends to be about 1.5 chapter to 2 chapter-ish for like the dialogue heavy like character interaction chapters, as because dialogue takes time for deliveries, even if it's reading it straight, which most of the time it's not. There'll be pauses for like, you know, character animation to take place and whatnot. It tends to take more time, while it's the big action-packed chapters and the fights and whatnot. Fights tend to take more pages in manga, while it's in animation, scene or move and whatnot takes less time. So more action-packed means more chapters in episode. So yeah, what I'm saying is around like 2 chapters in episode, it tends to be the more dialogue ones, and then 3 chapters or more will be in the like fights. For instance, speaking of action-packed episodes like covering more chapters, next episode here, episode 4, which I believe will cover all of chapter 6, all of chapter 7, and then I believe it could end a few places in chapter 8. I have it set down for page 13, as that's where I would personally end it, for like that emotional gut punch with like the ending of Gina's and Andy's interaction with the kiss and her finally passing. However, I think it could even end maybe page 17 with Move coming along. There's a few places it could end in this chapter, but I've gone with page 13 just because personally, that's where I would end it if I was the director for the series. Next up is episode 5, covering pages 14 through 23 of chapter 8, finishing off, and then all of chapter 9 and chapter 10, as this is like all of the Union stuff, like them being introduced to the Union, learning some of the rules and some of the lore, getting Cluffy. It's the Union stuff, and it ends off with like more information for the next arc to come, the spoil arc. So I believe just keeping like the new kind of like learning about the Union stuff in one episode will probably make it a bit easier for people to kind of get the grasp of it. Next up is episode 6, which I think would cover chapters 11, 12 and 13 in their entirety, because again there's it's a decent mix of dialogue heavy with like going to spoil, learning about like what the spoil crest is and whatnot, and it's also a decent bit of like action with Andy going against spoil or Andy going through the zombies with a lot of like 2-page panels going on, which will again take up like less time in animation to do so. I think they could do about 3 chapters here, and plus ending of the episode they're like just about the start of the spoil fight with Shen and Fuko joining Andy in the fight, I think is around a decent pacing for it. Next up is episode 7, which I've put down for chapters 14, 15 and 16 in their entirety to be covered, because there's a decent bit of action going on in these chapters with Shen just mollywopping the fuck out of spoil and beating his ass. But yeah, I think that amount of action, and plus with like the parts bullets from Victor and Victor taking on spoil, I think all of that culminates in like a decent bit of like action with like 2-page panels again for big action shots and whatnot. I think that all culminates in a decent like chance of all 3 of them being covered, and plus the episode ending off with the Union coming down from a move portal all about to jump Victor, I think is a great cliffhanger between episode 7 and episode 8, especially because that leaves the chance for episode 8 covering all of chapters 17, 18, 19, the entirety of the Victor fight with the Union, and even going on to showing off most of the conclusion for the spoiler arc with the results of the crests and whatnot in the Union room. And again, decent bit of action that I think can be covered in an episode to help quick up the pacing of like what chapters are covered. But also, I'm thinking of where the episode ends off, and I think having the episode end off with Uma Galaxy being added, like coming out of Apocalypse and it being revealed, I think that's a baller ass ending. I think it's an amazing ending. That'll get people excited to come back again and see the new episode like next week. Like, what the fuck is this? I think it would be a great ending place. I could see it ending a bit sooner, like maybe when Andy and Fuko join into the Union room, but I don't think that's a great ending off point personally, and I do see it being here. Next up is episode 9 with all of chapters 20 and 21, which I think could easily be covered in this one episode, because one, we get the start off with like Apocalypse adding Uma Galaxy from next week. We get all the door detail, some details that might even, you know, get people theorizing on. Again, all of that stuff from Uma Galaxy like being added to get people questioning stuff and theorizing, I think would be great. And then also we get the start off to the next arc, like starting off to get people excited for that as well, that being the Unrepair arc. So I think it's great, like capping off one arc, starting off another arc. And the next episode 10, I think we'll cover all of chapters 22, 23 and 24 for the simple fact of it's the proper start to the Unrepair arc with Andy and Fuko in the gallery area for the biddings and whatnot, getting the news of like and the reveal of Rip with Latla and the other ones, and then it's like the proper start of the fight between Andy and Rip with like their little skirmish, and then after Fuko gets got, they're running after him just before the fight properly starts. It's like we're like, okay, next week's gonna be an action week. Of course I say that, and since it's been a couple of days since I reread it, I forgot that the next episode actually covers Tatiana backstory. So yeah, episode 11 I think would just be 25 and 26, because again, backstory for like Tatiana, first of all, the like little skirmish she has with Andy, and then her and Fuko starting to become friends, and then her actual backstory as well, from like the activation of Untouchable, and also the reveal of Untouchable, like her destroying ship and the yucky character design she has. I'm not a fan of it, but since it's a heavily focused on backstory and like revealing character and whatnot, I think 25 and 26 will be like the Tatiana episode, with again leaving the cliffhanger of like the Andy versus Rip fight properly starting, but actually this time because I remembered properly. Next up, for actual real this time, we have the Andy versus Rip fight episode, and I think that's going to cover all of 27, 28, and then up to page 9 of 29. For the simple fact of, the other two chapters have a lot of action. It covers all of the Rip and Andy fight, and then I think the reason it ends at chapter 29, page 9, is because, like, that's when Fuko finishes talking to Chikara, like, on top of Tatiana's untouchable area thing, and then it's like cuts to 1 week later for when they're gonna pick him up at school. I think, like, hard cut on top of them talking, episode ends, next episode starts at the school going to pick up Chikara. I don't know, that's how I would personally do it, but I could see it ending in, like, sometime in front of school, like after Rip talks to them and reveals the under organization to them. But again, this is how I would do it if I was the director. And then this one, the next episode, again, finishing off chapter 29 and all of chapter 30, and that's all I think would be done in episode 13, because again, heavy dialogue kind of stuff going on with, like, this would start off with, like, them being in front of the school waiting for Chikara, Rip making his appearance, giving Fuko, like, the artifact and having them image of God appear. I think that will take up a decent bit of time, like, showing off that image, depending on if they do us, like, single images or maybe even, like, clips of, like, moving and whatnot. It depends on how they do that kind of imagery, and I'm really excited to see how they do that. And another reason I chose to end it in the end of chapter 3 is because that's when the 100 crest starts, and we're about to have that whole ordeal breakdown. And I think having that be basically the entirety of episode 14, yeah, I think ending in the end of episode 3 with, like, oh, new line of crests. Okay, that's what we get next episode. I think that's the good ending off point for it. Now, these next two episodes, I'm a bit iffy as to where episode 14 will end off. How I've got it in a minute is it will cover all of chapter 31 and 32 for the simple fact of, again, heavy dialogue focused episode, talking around, like, and I think having this be a bit more slower pace to help sink in reactions to certain things would do this episode very good. However, I could see it ending at some point in chapter 33 potentially. I just don't know where it would end off in chapter 33, especially because chapter 32, like, ends off similar how, like, ended off, like, a couple episodes ago for, like, okay, next fight's going to be the Rip fight. It'll be like, okay, next fight's going to be the Billy fighting against him finally. So I think this is, like, the best place I could find for this episode to end, but there could be a better place. If you're able to find one, let me know and I'll see if I agree or not in the comments. Now, this one's probably one of the ones I've had the most trouble with of finding an ending point for it, just because there's so much that happens in chapter 35 that I'm not sure where to end it in chapter 35, but I also think there's too much in that chapter to cover all of it. If we're talking about episode 15, I think it'll cover all of chapter 33 and all of chapter 34, and for me, the best place I could find for it to end is at page 9 of chapter 35, like, after Billy's finally gone away with that big explosion. She's going, there's a matter that I must discuss with everyone, ask you all week thing on the ground. I think that could be a decent, like, episode ending line, just like, okay, we're going to get big info next episode. But it's also like, I don't know, I feel like the reveal of the loop and whatnot for the rest of chapter 35 is much better paired with, like, the conversation they have surrounding it. They could potentially cover all of chapter 35 in this episode. I can see it, but I don't know, me personally, I wouldn't. I would leave that reveal of the loop and whatnot to be, like, its own episode to give it a break from the action. But obviously that means for episode 16, that would be the rest of chapter 35, all of chapter 36 and all of chapter 37. Again, I could see them trying to do all of chapter 35 in episode 15, but like I said, I personally wouldn't. However, I could see them if they did, and I don't really want to try and work out, like, what the pacing would be if they did do that, so I'm just going to stick with this pacing. So yeah, and again, the reason for ending at chapter 37 is because I think that's a great reveal point, just like, okay, this manga is a book of prophecies, so we're going to see what's going to happen, and it's a good leaving off point, like, okay, is it going to be a friend or a foe who wrote this? Let's find out, good teasing point. And then next we have episode 17 covering what I think would be all of 38, all of 39, and I think it would end on the first page of chapter 40. The reason for all of 38 and 39 is for like the entire conversation with Anna revealing what they look like, what their goal is, revealing Autumn, which, tell you what, monster fuckers were already eating with like Spoil and Galaxy, and maybe Apocalypse, I'm not sure. They finna be eating with Autumn. And the reason I think it would end on page 1 of chapter 40 is because, simply put, the like ominous hint with like Rip and Bunny standing there, I was like, okay, that's an episode, and it's like, oh, okay, Under's here. What's that foot look like? A bunny foot. Now we have the next episode being episode 18, which covering all of the scene with Andy like taking down all them bandits. The reason I say end it off there is just cause that's a really powerful moment to like hit you in the gut, you know. I think that would be a great ending off point for the episode. Now, these next group of episodes 19 through 22, I've had a bit of difficulty trying to figure out the pacing for the chapters, because going into this, I went into it with a specific idea as to where I want episode 23 to end off, like for season 1 to end off, and specifically what chapters I want covered in episode 23. So I've been kind of working with like trying to make sure it ends where I want it to end and how I want it to end. So these last few episodes were difficult to figure out the pacing. I wouldn't say this is the most confident set of episodes I am in, like what chapters I think will be covered where. What I've got down is the best I could figure out. However, I could see an argument for some of these being moved around. Apart from one chapter, I think there's one specific chapter I think should stay where I've put it, but we'll get to that in the next episode, because that will be episode 20. Episode 19, I've got for chapters 42 and 43 in their entirety, just them 2 episodes. The reason I've got like this is because I think 42 is like slow enough pace as it is to be able to take up a decent amount of time, especially with that like 2 pages of Andy and Fuko going on their little adventures throughout the years. I think that would make a montage of moments that would take up a decent amount of episode runtime. So 42, 43, especially with like the bit of Victor hunting down Fuko through the years, I think would make for good pacing. Again, like slowing it down a bit more. And also, I think the reveal of Andy coming to fight Victor in the end, I think that's a great episode ending off point. Now, the next one is episode 20 with chapters 44, 45, and 46. The reason I've done it like this is because 44 and 45 are very action-packed with Andy versus Victor. There's a lot of stuff going on, especially like the Unluck bullets, all of them attacks, the flurry of like slashing attacks, the dead roll clash. I think there's a lot going on there to where I think them two can take up a like small enough amount of time to get both in. And 46, I am hard unconvincible on like 46 has to be an episode ender in my opinion, because first of all, the like book closing, perfect ending off point for an episode. Would be erased to not have it be the ending off point for an episode. 46 is one that I will not budge on. 46 has to be the ending to an episode, and I will be a tad bit disappointed if it wasn't, admittedly. So 46 is like one of them chapters where like, okay, this has to be an episode ender. How do I work into it? Which has also made pacing a little bit more difficult, but I'm too stubborn to give up on that. Now, these next 2 episodes, 21 and 22, I had to try and figure out how to cover 7 chapters in these 2 episodes, which is a bitch to do. So, how I have it now is very rough and not my most confident. However, it's the best I could figure out with how I wanted to do. If there was a 24th episode, it would be a lot easier, and I probably could come up with a pacing that would work for 24 episodes with these 2 episodes. However, since I am confident it's a 23 episode season 1, this is what I've got. So for episode 21, it's 47, 48, and 49 in its entirety. And then for episode 22, it's chapters 50, 51, 52, and 53, which is the only 4 chapter episode I've got. I did kind of hard mess myself with how stubborn I am with where I want season 1 to end off. And again, sticking with an idea that it's 23 episodes, because again, I'm fully confident on that's what it is for season 1, because I'm fairly sure I saw that somewhere. It could just me being lying to myself, I don't know what, but this is what I've got for it. It's the best I could come up with. I'm sure if I had more time to think about it, since I'm doing this video fairly close to the release of season 1, there would be a better way to pace it. But again, this is the best I could come up with. And then for the final episode, episode 23, and the thing that made pacing so fucking hard, because I'm such a stubborn bitch, I think episode 23 will be all of chapters 54, 55 and 56, covering the winter arc and the Billy Dries fight in its entirety. The reason I'm so confident with it ending here is because for normal pacing for like Weekly Shonen Jump animation, one of a 23-24 episode season 1 is it covers about 60ish episodes, and I think this is the best ending off point with that kind of pacing, because the other only really ending off point is like 69, which is a lot of extra chapters to cover. So I do think 56 is the most makes sense ending off point. They could do like a couple pages into 54 if they wanted to end with autumn, but I think the winter end is so much better because one, that final line from Billy of just Rue will be taken unlocked no matter what, like really sets up next season. Like, oh, okay, they want Fuko now. A good hype up for what's to come for next season. And also, I don't see winter being a decent starting off point for season 2. You could possibly be used as like to try and recap people on what happened. However, I think it's much better of like a ending off season 1. I'm also just very stubborn and had that idea in my head of end at 56, and I just want to stick with it because again, I think that ending line is the best ending line they could do for season 1. So yeah, it's a mix of I generally think this would be good, and also I'm a stubborn cunt. So today is the 6th of October. It is the day Undead Unluck comes out. It is, let's say, 20 to 5 in the afternoon. The episode comes out at 20 to 6. So I'm doing this dead on close to the fucking release. And now that I know the episodes come out at about... Normally they're supposed to come out about 5:30. But like, I don't know if it's... I still don't know where here in the UK it's going to be streaming, if it's going to be Disney Plus or hopefully Crunchyroll, for the love of God, please. But wherever it is, basically by the time the episode comes out, subtitled for us in England to watch, I'm going to be at work, so I don't get to see it till like 10 hours after everyone else. I'm kind of miffed about that. So, yeah. You know, this episode has to come out late, but man, why do I gotta wait so much longer than everyone else to fucking watch it? So, how do you think I did? You know, do you think I have a good idea of like the pacing one, or do you think my ideas are stupid? For instance, then 4 chapters in 1 episode, I could have probably done a bit better. But again, that's because that's my fault for procrastinating. And if you're from the future, if you're like, okay, season 1's finished, let's see how dumb this bitches, just jump on me in the comments, hound on me in the comments, give me that sweet YouTube algorithm interactions. And if you enjoyed the video, stick around. I'm going to be talking about Undead Unluck's anime every week, and hopefully not accidentally dropping it like I did with my hero in the videos. And I'll definitely be talking about it every week on my TikTok like I do with the manga. So if you want to see like more consistent like morning once a week stuff, go check out my TikTok and stick around here for the like once a week talking about the new episodes. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good one.